All right, and we are live. Good evening to everybody. Dante D here, and welcome to the channel where we talk about comic books and other geek stuff. Tonight, with me, I have a seasoned comic book collector and pop cultural analyst, Eric Breen. Eric, welcome to the show.
How you doing? Every good Batman needs a Joker.
Exactly. Oh, yeah, we're like complete opposites tonight. This is amazing. So tonight we're going to be talking about quite a few different things. We're going to be talking about the good old days of comic book collecting, as well as some of the challenges that the comic book industry is facing as things slowly start opening up, the type of content the comic book industry is putting out nowadays, and the possible future of the comic book industry. So I'm going to start off on a little bit more of a positive note. And Eric, you've had an amazing comic book collection. You've come into contact with some amazing comic books over the years. How did you first get into comic book collecting? What got you into comic books?
Well, when I was a little kid, I was into baseball cards, and then my brother got into comic books when he was about 16. And like most little brothers, you kind of try to emulate what your big brother's into, and that's how I got interested in it. He lasted about 8 months, and I lasted 45 years and counting.
So, how did your brother kind of get away from it? Was he did he just kind of get interested in other things, or?
Yeah, I don't think he was really all that interested. I think he got into it because a friend of his in high school was, and they both kind of dropped out about the same time, and that's kind of how it works. I mean, a lot back in those days, almost everybody at least tried them out, and then just most people it didn't stick, and for some it did. And so I said he was gone, almost immediately, and just he just gave his stuff to me, and I just kept going.
Right. All right. And before I get into the next question, I just wanted to say hello to some of the viewers that are participating in the chat tonight. We have El Torito Films from California. We have Talassian74, Scott 424. Good evening to everyone. And Mike from Night Tiger Comics, who just finished up his live stream where he did an awesome comic book haul. So welcome to everybody. Really look forward to chatting with everyone, and glad to have you all here. Now, Eric, everyone remembers that first comic book that they got. Like for me, it wasn't that special. Mine was Frank Miller's Dark Knight Returns. I guess it wasn't even really a comic book. It was more of a graphic novel. I got it for Christmas one year. I'm sure the first book that you got was probably a lot more special. Do you remember the first book you got?
Well, I remember when I was years before I started, I think I got a Justice League. I think it was issue 91 where I think the Flash is either Batman's carrying the Flash or the Flash is carrying Batman. And I recognized Batman from the TV show. So I picked it up at a drugstore, and I think I got an issue of Batman along the way. But as far as like what really got me going, it was like, about October or so of 1975. And I found, I saw like Batman, Detective Comics, Superman in action, because back then, I knew the DC, characters. And I think I picked up, I remember, and I do remember it was, Batman was like 272, Detective 456, Action was 456. They were actually on the same number at the time. And Superman, I think, was 297. And then I picked up Iron Man 83 and Fantastic Four 167. And that had one of those Thing Hulk, stories. It was the one where the Hulk's gamma radiation turned the Thing back into Ben Grimm. And I thought, wow, hey, this is kind of cool. And, and then I just, each month I started picking up a few more and a few more. And back then, heck, you could cover that with your allowance. They were only 25 cents new.
Right. Now, so you were buying, how many comics a week were you getting? Because it sounds like you picked up quite a few at first.
In those days, probably 10 to 15, maybe a little bit more. Must have cut a lot of grass that year.
Yeah, I mean, for 25 cents each. So basically, I mean, I wasn't around back in the 70s, but it sounds like comic books were a little bit more accessible to young people than they are today. Was that the case?
Well, you got to remember in the mid 70s, there were no such thing as video games. And, when, in 1975, the only entertainment you could control was the record you put on your turntable. I mean, you didn't have instant access to all forms of entertainment. So, something like comic books, that kind of fan said, oh, wow, I can get, each month, I can get these and, I can decide when I want to read them. I don't have to wait for the late show to show that movie I want to see. So, but there weren't a whole lot of entertainment options that could be consumed at home. Hell, we had three channels, four if the antenna was working. Our records, and I said, if you were into, if you picked up a habit or a hobby like comic books, that was, just one of the few things you could really get immersed in, at the time. And I think that's what gravitated me towards comics. And, just like I said, something obviously stuck with me.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Just wanted to, we have a few more viewers joining us. We have Daniel Dose. We have Louis, who actually was a guest on our live stream last week, who I know it's very late in Scotland right now. So Louis, thanks for tuning in. And also Adrian Benningfield. Welcome to everybody. So Eric, I know you said you started collecting back in the 1970s, you said it was, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, when we kind of touched base yesterday and kind of did our little dry run, you were telling me that you had like a lot of the Marvel Silver Age keys that are so coveted nowadays, correct?
I had everything from Fantastic Four #1 through Fear itself.
Wow.
Superhero. I said superhero comics. I had everything. I mean, complete sets of Amazing Spider-Man, Fantastic Four, Incredible Hulk, Daredevil, X-Men, et cetera, et cetera. And I mean, condition wasn't important to me. I mean, I just wanted to have the books.
Right.
And I said we were talking about yesterday. Like an example. I mean, I've been doing this so long. I got my Avengers #4 for $20. I got a beat up Avengers 1 for $2. And I said it because back then, you could, I was working at a hotel and I was a bellman, and every penny of tips, for a while just went into books.
That sounds that's almost unheard of. Like to hear some of those prices that you're quoting right now for those huge keys, it's just unbelievable. Now back in the day, I'm assuming there weren't really many comic book stores around. And there was no Midtown Comics or a lot of the back issue services. How did you go about finding all these back issues?
Actually, I discovered the comic book shop that I still go to today. It's a place called Comic Book World in Florence, Kentucky, and I discovered it before I got my job, and I was down to my last $50, and I discover a comic book shop. It was like, holy crap, talk about bad timing. But because in 1982, the economy hadn't come back yet. And I mean, it was hard to find a job, but I got one. It was almost like your fate said, you need something to waste money on. So here, and I've been shopping there, since like March of '82, and they're still, going strong.
Awesome. That's amazing.
Before that,
it
was just newsstand and hope that they actually got them. I mean, there would be, I can remember the cover month of November 1976. Nobody got them in the area, and I had all kinds of trouble finding those.
Right.
It was just spotty in those days.
Now, the thing that I really admire about you is you had a lot of comic books, but you also can remember the stories that were in them, like almost photographically. It's unbelievable. And so I'm going to give you a little test here. I have Scott 424 was saying that his first comic book was X-Men 135. What happened in X-Men 135?
That would have been right around the close to the culmination of the Dark Phoenix storyline. And that would have, I think at that time she had been well, for lack of a better term, arrested by the Shi'ar, and the X-Men were in space. And because I remember, I think 137 was the penultimate chapter of that, so it would have been like close to leading up to that.
You know what? Yeah, I was just gonna say it's around the Dark Phoenix stuff. I can vaguely remember that actually. I mean, I'm not as pro as you, but I definitely I can remember that. So now nowadays your comic book collecting habits have changed a little bit. What can you tell me about you've had to sell off a few of your books, right?
I sold 55,000 books, give or take.
55,000 books. Wow. Now it's really kind of funny because you see on YouTube sometimes some of these videos, and it's like world's biggest comic book collection. It's like 20,000 books, 30,000 books, and then you come and tell me that you had 55,000 books. So there are certainly bigger collections out there, right?
Oh yeah, a guy I know that's in our comics aficionados group, his personal collection, I think he said last time he counted was 104,000, and he either currently owns or has owned Detective 27, personally, because he runs a shop. And I mean, I said, I thought, it's one of those, well, it's like the playground theory. No matter how tough you are, there's always somebody tougher. So I said, my collection was the biggest that I knew of, but there are ones out there that just blew mine away. And
right, yeah, absolutely. It's sometimes in the comic book world, it can definitely easily turn into a pissing match, right?
Well, yeah, nerd fights.
Yeah, nerd fights, right? Now, I just want to let you know, Davis Comics says hello.
How's it going, Davis Comics? I recognize that name. Like I said, Scott, I know he does. He's got a channel and he does really good haul videos also.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, we have quite a nice community here. This is just amazing. A lot of people showing up for our live stream tonight. If you're just joining us right now, we are live with Eric Breen, who is a seasoned comic book collector. He was just telling us he had a collection of 55,000 books. I also wanted to make everybody aware of a new feature that we have on this evening's live stream. It's a super chat. If you want to find a way to support the channel, super chats or donations are always appreciated. Now, Eric, what's how many books do you have now? Because you said you kind of you sold off your collection and now you've jumped right back into it.
Well, yes and no. I mean, I think I have about close to 100 short boxes full, but they're backed and boarded, so they really only fit about 100, 110 in each one. And I just pick up things that I either want to read or things that I know aren't going to be reprinted, because I said, I had a couple. I grabbed a couple things to show. Like today or these days, I'm more interested in stuff like that. I mean, like the Shield Omnibus that's got all the issues, and because I'll never be able to track all those down again, nor would I be able to afford them. And then you got the Masterworks that are really really good, because I said they're remastered, which gotta be honest, when you get older, it's easier on the eyes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Epic collections, those are that way you can get the stories back that you wanted without paying hundreds of dollars per issue in some cases, if not thousands. Right.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you're showing those omnibuses. Those omnibuses, I actually am starting to prefer those a little bit more too. But those are not always the easiest things to come across. Am I correct? Because the print runs are only they're limited, right? So after they stop the print run, the prices just go up.
Can I address a comment real quick?
Yeah, for sure.
Nightinger Comics, I do have a channel with 3 videos totaling about 7 minutes of content. It's under the name Eric Breen, and mine is the one with the logo of the band The Jam. but I am going to be doing another video sometime next week because I've got a haul video of my own to do. But I much prefer talking to people like Dante, live than, because I don't have any editing skills or anything like that. So my videos are, how do I say this? They're trash.
Let's use a euphemism. Let's just say raw.
Okay. I like that better.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. What was the question?
Actually, that I just wanted to say that.
Oh yeah, tracking down the omnibuses,
right?
Yeah. Well, one of the problems with some of these books now is, what's good for the collector is that Amazon, you can find all of these, but the problem is they gave the companies like Marvel and DC gave them such great deals that they a lot of times they'll sell omnibuses for less than comic book store owners can pay for them, and it no longer becomes economically feasible for the place that should be carrying them to carry them, and that's an unfortunate consequence of the great deals that we get as collectors and readers. It is hard to go into a comic book store and find an omnibus because everybody knows you can go on Amazon and get it cheaper, and that's
right.
Unfortunate, for them.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, that's also the case with, the Masterworks, because they, when I got my first Masterwork, I think they were $39.99. They're $75 now.
Yep. And here in Canada, when an omnibus is just printed, you're looking to spend between like 120 to sometimes 150 for like a brand new off the press omnibus, and then as soon as it goes out of print, you're looking at sometimes $300 to $500. Obviously, I've never spent that kind of cash on an omnibus, but I've been looking for the Amazing Spider-Man Volume 2 omnibus because I have Volume 1, and it's just you can't find it anywhere. But I think they're reprinting it. I don't know if you know anything about
this will be the third or fourth time that they've reprinted those, and why they don't keep the same version in print, I think it has something to do with shelf space at Diamond. They would dictate, what the companies would keep in print, because that's where obviously that's where the people order them from, and they only have so much space. Although it looks like they're about to get a lot of empty shelves freed up that we'll be touching on in a little bit.
Yeah, we definitely. I was just going to say, Diamond. We have so much to cover with Diamond. Louis from Studio Fitness just wanted to ask you if you could buy one run of comics, what would it be? Tough one. This is actually going to segue us into best stories of all time, right?
Yeah. Because I said my favorite run of all time, what I think is the best run, is the Lee Kirby Fantastic Four. But if I could have one run back, I think it would be Amazing Spider-Man, because I have a hard time finding a bad issue in the first 300.
Yep. Absolutely. I definitely would agree with that. Now, what do you think it is? Because Spider-Man arguably is one of the most popular superheroes. It's definitely between Spider-Man, Batman, or Superman, right? Actually, if anything, I think Superman's probably a little bit further down the ladder nowadays. So I would say more. Yeah, exactly. So I definitely would say Batman versus Spider-Man here. What do you think it is about Spider-Man that really, captured people's hearts?
He's an everyman. He's not perfect. Kids can relate to his problems, and then as they aged him up a little bit, adults can. Who hasn't had trouble paying the rent? Who hasn't had girl trouble?
Right
now, great. So we can't swing on a web through between Manhattan skyscrapers, but the rest of his human problems, and and I think he's always had a great rogues gallery of villains, but I think more important, he had a great supporting cast of his friends. So because I noticed, like, when I read the early runs in the 60s, if you noticed, it was almost like Archie comics. Like Peter Parker was Archie, Gwen and Mary Jane were Betty and Veronica, Flash was Reggie, Harry was Jughead. Yep. Kind of like and they spent not as much time with those characters as they did the characters that they interacted with as Spider-Man. But then like I said, Joe Robertson, JJJ, Aunt May, and it was a great supporting cast. And the cast, the supporting cast has changed over the years, and obviously the villains, the Rogues Gallery, they've added to it. Like to say like Venom and Carnage in the last 30 years, which is kept interest up. And I just think there's enough to that character, to make it to just keep him interesting to everybody. But I think the main thing that happened, and this is going to probably anger a few purists, I think the best thing that ever happened to Spider-Man for longevity was Steve Ditko leaving Marvel, because his vision for Peter Parker and Spider-Man was basically he wanted him to stay the same age. He wanted him to remain aloof and basically friendless, because Ditko, I said, anybody that knows about Steve Ditko knows about his views. And Stan and John Romita were on the same page. And the character, like I said, the popularity of Peter Parker, I think, skyrocketed with that pairing, and took Spider-Man with him, and it's remained that way to this day.
Yeah, I absolutely. I personally think as well that there are two things about Spider-Man that I think were really unique. The one thing was, I know we're getting a little laggy here, sorry. But the one thing is the fact that supporting cast, I feel that they really brought, kind of the drama and the superhero genre together, unlike any other superhero magazine at the time. Plus, I think it is great that they aged Spider-Man a little bit, right? I think he's probably one of the only heroes that's really aged, if I'm correct. Would you agree?
Well, Marvel characters have a sliding age scale. Peter Parker is probably aged about 10 to 12 years. If he's written correctly. I mean, I would put him about 27, 28 at this point. Although, some writers like right now, I think Spencer's keeping him like early 20s, so it kind of fluctuates. Like say the Fantastic Four, for example. I said Reed and Sue never seemed to get any older per se, but Franklin slowly ages, and I know now they jumped him into a teenager, but because I think that was probably because he started as a younger character. I mean, you can't really keep him 15, 16 forever. That only works in Riverdale.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Because I mean, Batman has always been portrayed as kind of a guy who's like, maybe 35, 30 something. And he doesn't seem to be aging. So, I mean, there's only so much you can do with they have like, alternate, incarnations of him, where he's older and things like that. And I think that's actually interesting when they do something like that. But so like I wanted to move on and talk a little bit about, we're about it now, some favorite stories. It's really interesting that you mentioned Spider-Man and that being one of your favorite runs. Later on in the 70s, it seemed like they kind of wanted to bank off of the whole Peter Parker formula again with Nova. What did you think of the Nova run? You think it worked again?
I was a huge fan. That was the first new character that Marvel introduced after I started collecting. Mm-hmm. So I had about 9 or 10 months, and I go, man, this is great. And because obviously, and they did it. It was pretty much cut and paste, with the exception of Richard Rider had a girlfriend from the get-go, but he had the Mike Burley, Flash Thompson, archetype, the bully. He had a couple, and he actually had friends, but it was more like Peter Parker, like Mike Burley represented the Ditko Spider-Man parallel, but the other one's kind of more along the lines of Lee and Romita, because he did have friends and a girlfriend, but he did have the Tormentor as well. And nothing seemed to go right for him in his Richard Rider identity, at least initially. But I thought the first year of Nova was a blast. I mean, the villains, you had Diamond Head, Condor, Powerhouse, the dreaded one who we found out was the Sphinx, and then there was the the guy with the no face that turned out to be Caps's uncle that cubed creature had fallen in love with because it was female. I mean, it was a fun book.
Absolutely. I have that run. I think I have the first maybe 20 so issues. I know I have it up to when Infantino took over for a bit, and I agree. It was really kind of a charming book. Now I feel like they tried to kind of replicate that Peter Parker formula again with a new character in the 90s, and that I don't know if you've ever read Sleepwalker.
I did. I'm not as familiar with it. I would think that they actually, in that same time period, I think they tried that with Darkhawk too.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
But that was something that comics in general tended to do. I mean, you could say that about Firestorm over at DC. They back then, comic books had supporting casts, and those were important to the characters because everything wasn't wall-to-wall events. There was more time to develop supporting characters, and I think that's something that yesterday's comics had over today's. Is there's like kind of like the human touch. I mean, like I said, with your non-powered characters, and that you could grow to care about as much as the superpowered ones.
Absolutely. Yeah, for sure. I'm just taking a look at some of the comments here. Tib Plateau is asking, did either of you enjoy Dan Abnett's run on Nova? I actually haven't read it. Have you?
Yes, it was the one like the 2006-ish. It was part of the I call it the Cosmic Odyssey, even though I stole that from the DC miniseries, but because you had the Guardians, you had a ton of miniseries, and it was going on out in space at the same time that Civil War was going on in Earth and Planet Hulk was going on, and Marvel was just firing on all cylinders. But I liked the run, but that run didn't have much of what the first one had. Like I said, it was basically he was in space for almost all the issues because it was part of a grandiose story they were telling. And so, I think his younger brother had become a member of the Nova Corps by then. And I think, like I said, the Caps and Bernie and Ginger, those and Mike Bro, they were long gone by then. But it was a fantastic series, and anybody that hasn't read those, so you can. It was part of the Annihilation storyline. If that name rings about the original one, and that anybody that hasn't read that, I mean, it's probably over 100 issues all told, but it was hell of a story.
Yep, and that is Annihilation. That was confirmed here by.
That's what I couldn't remember. I have the books right in front of me, and I still couldn't remember.
Yeah. Now I actually there was a question a little earlier. It slips my mind who asked it, but what are you currently collecting right now?
As far as new comics coming out, I'm reading about 10 from DC. The couple of Justice League titles, Batman Detective. Flash, which is actually, I read the latest issue today. It's really good. Green Lantern. I'm not a huge Morrison fan, but what he's doing on this is really kind of interesting. And like the latest issue, it's drawn almost in a Kirby-esque kind of style.
Yep.
And like the latest, whenever a deceased series comes out, I get on that. I am planning on reading the Joker War because I am reading Nightwing, but other than like the DC titles, there's a monthly comic monthly magazine called Creeps, and it's done in the old eerie and creepy style from the Warren magazines from the 60s and 70s, and it's as close as you're ever going to get to those again. And that's about it as far as new stuff.
Yeah. Okay. It's actually funny too that you mentioned that you weren't that big of a Morrison fan, because I myself am not that big of a Morrison fan. I've always considered him the Fellini of the comic book world.
Hmm.
You know, like you read the book and you feel like this should be really good because it's so artistic, but you just can't get into it. And that's exactly how I feel about Fellini films. I don't know how you feel about them, but
That's a great way to put it. It's like, I'm not trying to discount that. I'm sure his Animal Man run was great. I didn't care for the Doom Patrol. I mean, I've liked some of the stuff. I thought his best work was when they put him on the Justice League and said, "Don't Grant Morrison all over this book. Just give us a great superhero." I stole that term from somebody, and he did. It was kind of like when Magneto built a ship without using any metal just to prove he could. It was kind of like Grant Morrison said, "Okay, I will give you a superhero team without my usual tropes to prove I can." And I thought that was a very good run. And I know, Scott, I'm not a big Star Wars fan. I know I lose all kinds of nerd cred for saying that, but although I did have the original Marvel Star Wars series.
Okay, all right, okay. Now, so you get some nerd cred back now. Now, before we move on to talking about current challenges in the comic book industry, Night Tiger Comics was asking if you or anybody else on the feed right now was upset when they took the mantle of the Bat away from Azrael
After Nightfall.
So after Nightfall, Azrael took over for a bit, but then there were a number of people that hated Azrael. So naturally, they had to bring Bruce Wayne back. So I'm assuming, Mike, you were a fan of Azrael then. What did you think about it?
It was fine for the limited time that it was, because that allowed him to do things with the Batman character that you could never do with Bruce Wayne. That was never intended to be long term. And, it did lead to his own book. They redeemed him enough to where, they could go forward with the character. But, because, Batman can be somebody else for a while, but eventually it's got to revert back to Bruce Wayne. When he was lost in time after Final Crisis and they had the battle for the cowl, Dick filled in for a while and, so it was, it worked for that story. Because it was never intended to be permanent. So that's, I liked it.
Yep. Oh, good. Okay. I'm glad you liked it. And I just wanted to just apologize right now. We're a little laggy. I don't know why this seems to happen. My Wi-Fi seems to like kind of go up and down, but yeah, so I apologize. Focus on our voices when we get a little choppy, I guess. So I kind of wanted to move on to talking about the comic book industry is in a little bit of trouble right now. So as things start to open up, there are some challenges. We mentioned Diamond Comics a little earlier. They seem to be in a little bit of financial trouble. People are kind of up in arms and I've kind of had it with Diamond. So much, in fact, that DC has pulled out of Diamond and has picked a new distribution model. What do you think about all that?
I think, honestly, Diamond, served their purpose, but anytime you get a monopoly, eventually you get complacent. And it never occurred to Diamond that anybody would ever search for another model after everybody was herded in under the Diamond umbrella. DC, use this as an opportunity, because Diamond couldn't shut down fast enough when the pandemic started. Right. And I realized the industry, Marvel went pencils down, most of the indies went belly up. DC just kept churning. So they needed somewhere to, somebody get these books out, because they, so as not to do digital forever. And they did. I think, Lunar and UCS, that's run by Midtown Comics, I think, are the two they're using now.
Yes.
And I noticed that. And I think Diamond, just canceled a lot of store owners' DC orders that I think they may have even still had. And so now there's I mentioned yesterday, if a friend of mine has not gotten the last 3 Batmans for various reasons, the latest one being that, Diamond just did not ship DC to the, accounts that were still using them.
Right.
And that's terrible for the retailer. It's terrible for the fans. And obviously, Diamond's hurting because this is a massive account that they've lost, and they know that if Marvel follows suit, they're done. So yeah, I think they're
exactly. Yeah. Adrian Benningfield is saying Diamond sucks even before COVID-19, and I think I would agree with that. What's to stop the comic book industry from? I mean, I'm not a business person by any means. I don't have an economics degree or anything, but what's to stop the comic book industry from going back to an older model in which comics can be purchased in drugstores, grocery stores, bookstores? I mean, you would think that, they would become more accessible that way. They're more in people's faces.
The comic book, the monthly comic will never be fully integrated into bookstores or drugstores or, any place like that again, because print in general has diminished to the point to where it's not worth the shelf space. It's the reason why, CDs, as burning and file sharing and stuff became more prevalent, the CD shelves at like the Best Buys and the place just would be smaller every time you went in. Same with DVDs, because I said like Walmart has almost completely stopped selling digital media because they can put anything on those shelves and get a better margin. Right. So the periodical is it's dying. I mean, most of the magazines that I was a fan of throughout my life have either gone digital or gone away entirely. Now that's not to say that you won't see if like the industry, if Marvel or DC, like these YA novels, graphic novels are doing, they can get those into bookstores, but those same stores are not going to be willing to commit the space to the floppies. At least not at this point, and I truly don't see that ever coming back. We've had conversations before where ways you could get them into more people's hands. I always thought, and maybe I'm just maybe there's an obvious reason why they can't that I'm missing, but why can't you go to a movie theater to see that blockbuster comic book movie and have comic books? Work out some kind of deal with like the the cinemas where you can get a comic book with your popcorn and overpriced beverage,
right?
Because where else you're going to be seen by? You're never going to be seen by more potential readers. Now, I think they're two different audiences. I think comic book fans will support the movies. Comic book movie fans, very rare do they go from the movies to the comics. But that said, you'd never know unless you tried. And I said that's because a lot of people have probably seen. There are people I'm sure have seen every superhero movie, probably never set foot in a comic book shop.
Absolutely, yeah, for sure. That's why I definitely think that movies do not increase comic book sales. The companies know that, so that I feel like they're just kind of putting everything into the movies now. Why focus on comics?
Yeah, I now the companies themselves, like Marvel, when the movies first started coming out, they tried to make the characters in the comics fit the movies, and then they inexplicably replaced them all with younger, like all new, all different versions of them. Mm-hmm. But I always thought the simplest solution would have been have a live action comic book universe, like using Marvel as an example, and the characters from the movies and the Netflix shows and Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. in one continuity. Have the Marvel 616 that we grew up with and remembered, leave that one the way it was, and then have like a YA division where your Kamala Khans, your Miles Moraleses, and so it could thrive. And if there's enough demand in those, in like one version, like there's nothing that says you couldn't, move somebody from YA to the 616, but leave the entertainment universe as self-contained. So if you're a fan of the way those characters are presented, on your movies or your Netflix shows, and you got to buy that comic, that's the version you're going to get. Because I think of like, say you went to see, whatever Marvel movies came out in 2016, for example, and say you did go into a comic book shop, you're looking for an Iron Man comic, and you pick up and go, wait a minute, she's a 16-year-old girl in this, but wasn't he Robert Downey Jr. in the movie I just watched? Or, wasn't Hulk a grown up? Here he is a teen, and so that's it's hard enough to get those people to get interested in comics, but then when the movie versions were based on characters that have been around since the 60s, when they're suddenly not there, that any shot you had at them is gone. And I thought
Absolutely.
that was a huge miscalculation by Marvel.
Right. Now, Dark Angel Callie is saying that manga is the future of printed comic related material. Do you read any manga?
At one time, I was a pretty big manga fan. I don't read any anymore, but I agree with that actually. But especially now that you're growing, kids are growing up with no particular attachment to comic book characters, so it's easier for them to embrace manga as opposed to I became a fan, and I love stuff like Battle Royale, but I was I always gravitated back to the superheroes. But that's I'm a product of my generation. And one of the things that I think has helped manga in this country is how expensive monthly comics have gotten, how Marvel's kind of gotten away from what made them so successful, as far as their comics. And in manga, what what you're going to get with with manga. With Marvel, you really don't know. I mean, you could open up a particular book, and the writer is smiting his Twitter enemies through the dialogue of one of his characters. Manga is straightforward. You're gonna and that it definitely will help them remain popular. I definitely see them growing, even as superhero comics continue to shrink.
Absolutely. Yeah, I would agree with that. I think too, with manga, just to talk about it briefly, they kind of have a cross genre appeal, right? So they're kind of the art style is, it's kind of in a way that can appeal to adults, but it also can appeal to kids. I'm thinking with my kids in particular, they're not really interested in comic books, but they want me to read manga to them. They ask me to read Dragon Ball to them all the time. So they absolutely eat it up,
Yeah, I'm not surprised. It's they're not like something like a Dragon Ball. Definitely has something that will catch a young reader's eye, and I said older readers, I'm sure have moved on from characters like that. But I mean, you can grow with with manga characters, and like maybe graduate from Dragon Ball Z to like the next whatever that'll be. And I I'm too far. My manga days are too far in the rearview mirror for me not to sound anything like an idiot. When I talk about this, but I could I do know its popularity is, as I said, increasing exponentially. And somebody that brought up said RDV, thank you for coming over tonight. And he goes that a manga is $15 now. I didn't really, they were 10 when I was buying them, but it's still 220 pages of story and art. So I mean, if you are a fan, now he goes, I'd rather spend 15 on comics, and that's perfectly valid as well. And quite frankly, so would I. But when the companies aren't giving me what I want, like I'd rather spend $15 on manga than Marvel at this point. No question.
Absolutely. And speaking of companies not giving the readers what they want. So I was telling you yesterday that I've been away from reading new comics for quite a few years now, and just out of curiosity, I decided I was going to take a look at what Marvel's doing. I know they were getting a lot of flack a few years ago for their SJW comics and making Captain Marvel the center of their universe. So I thought maybe what they're doing now isn't so bad. And the first thing I see when I Google what Marvel's doing right now is Snowflake and Safe Space. So my question is, and if for those of you watching who don't know who Snowflake and Safe Space are, basically Marvel has in the last few months. This is actually a little bit of old news, but Marvel's been soliciting a new Warriors book where all of the members of the New Warriors are as SJW as you can get. So you have Safe Space, who's one character. You have Snowflake. You have Screen Time. You have Trailblazer, and Trailblazer I think is one of the funniest there. I know Snowflake and Safe Space are getting the most flack, but Trailblazer has a magical backpack, and she looks like Adora the Explorer who explores a little bit too much in the fridge. So
Dora the Exploded.
Yeah, Dorothy exploded, exactly. So so my question to you is, fans in the past have been very, very vocal about this type of content, signaling and comic books. So why do they keep producing this type of content? And I mean, DC's not even innocent of this either. They put out I think it was Gotham. Was it Gotham High?
Yeah.
Where Bruce Wayne is now all of a sudden Asian and Alfred's gay. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that, but like, why do you have to do that to those particular characters?
Well, now to DC, their YA books are separate continuity, and they're trying to reach a new audience that they want to grow with the characters. However, they are so different from how they're portrayed in the comics that DC is going to have a problem if they actually do get some people that start with those and then graduate to the the DC Comics line, because their regular superhero line is at least still at least a reasonable facsimile of the characters. Marvel, it's getting tougher to tell them apart without a program, even on the ones that technically have been around forever, because the way they're presented is just so different. Now, as far as like why do they continue to do this kind of content? Marvel is, I look at, like I said, the two companies. DC is political correctness, Marvel is social justice, and I think they are trying to create an audience for their books that they want going forward, and it's the kind of people that actually, it's people that would I don't want to say more tolerant, because I don't want to sound like I'm intolerant, but I mean, I care about superhero stories. I don't particularly care about the what a fictional character's sexuality is, or there's an issue of the Champions, and they were a teen hero book. And you want to read that and I'll finish my story.
Adrian Benningfield just sent a $5 super chat. Thank you very much. It's the first super chat on the channel, so I really appreciate that. He says, I don't mind diversity. I just wish they would stop being lazy and develop new characters. I think it's extremely demeaning to different groups. I agree. I agree, Adrian. I think people who fall into the category of those diverse backgrounds are actually offended by this type of content. I mean, I think the guy who was writing the New Warriors, is Daniel Kibblesmith or something like that. Yep. He was saying like, oh, this character's non-binary, and this character and she goes by they. Again, this is the reality we're living in, and there's nothing wrong with LGBTQ to whatever other letter you want to add to it, but Why does it have to be in comics? Why does it have to be so in your face?
Well, it's diverse. I don't mind diversity either. I mean, there are characters that have been done very well. Like as far as like the last, I would say Miles Morales has been done relatively well in comparison to some of the other characters that are, it seems like they're just there to check the right boxes. Now, again, like I said, the story I was referencing was the Champions, and it was Riri Williams, Gogurt Hulk, whatever Baby Nova, whatever his name was, and there was all the kid characters, and Riri and one of the other ones were sitting on a plane that had crashed over. There was 200 dead bodies in the plane, and they're arguing over privilege. Venkman, yeah. I'm really regretting this decision.
Yeah, so RDV, thank you for the super chat, $4.99. So here's another. Don't listen to Eric Breen. He's intolerant to Bendis and Jason Aaron. And I'm laughing right now because in our conversation yesterday, you were talking about the 20-year-old who thinks Brian Michael Bendis is the next Tolstoy.
Yeah, that's from that last night.
Okay.
That's right. Bank, you should have to pay to talk to me after that one.
Yeah. So, what do you have any response to RDV?
None are needed.
Yeah, none are needed. Okay.
He knows the response.
Yeah, he knows the response, right?
No, it said RDV is a great guy. You follow him on Twitter. He's and he's very active. He and I are Englantine's Ed McMahon and Doc Severinsen to his Johnny Carson on the Saturday night auctions and the other 67 live streams he does a week.
Awesome. Yeah, so I'll have to check some of those out. But it's really interesting to see because this new model of including political rhetoric and comics is actually extending to film as well, and I'm thinking particularly, with the Avengers movies, as well as Star Wars, and with the Avengers movie, I'm thinking particularly when they had all the women Avengers in Avengers Endgame, and they go to attack, and Peter Parker's just kind of thrown to the side like, yeah, let us take care of this. And then in Star Wars, I mean, I don't even have to mention what's been going on with Star Wars. And I know you said this is an issue in Hollywood, right? And when you're seeing this type of stuff, you're thinking that this is how everybody thinks, but that's definitely not the case. Everybody is actually very vocal, but they keep on doing it. So comics, why is it also now in Hollywood too?
Well, it's not how everybody thinks, but it's how they would like everybody to think at some point. I think that's the end goal is, it's like, it's at some point they want to be able to present things, one way, and you'll have two choices. You either assimilate or, go away. Right now we're in the, where we still have a choice. And it's going to be real interesting to see how the next wave of Marvel movies goes, because they had a formula that worked. I mean, when you can get $500 million out of an Ant-Man movie, you are doing something right. But it's right. Like the everything that they've announced, post Black Widow, it's and like I said, these have to get made. Now I don't know if what's happened this year with COVID will make them, put those plans on hold, because they might have to. It seemed like they made all these billions so they could, have money in reserve as they tried to groom the future audiences, knowing that some of these movies will take a hit financially and not do nearly as well as the previous Marvel movies done. They may have to go, okay, we better give, the fans, that group, another batch of movies so we can get a couple more, $1.5 billion movies so we can build the war chest back up. or they may just say the heck with it and just go full speed ahead.
Right.
Maybe it'll work. Maybe I'm going to end up being completely wrong, but you've seen the signs. Strangely enough, that A-Force pose in Avengers Endgame, that didn't bother me because it was quick. It was it's like it was almost like, okay, quick photo op, and now let's go get back in the fight. And Peter Parker, and he is a kid in this universe.
Yep. You're right. And honestly, it personally didn't bother me, but when they did it, I'm like, there they are. I got you.
You definitely
I see what you're doing.
Yeah.
Like I wasn't like, I went to go see it with my family, and we were just kind of like, there they are, and you can kind of get the sense of where Marvel's going to go next with their next wave of MCU films, just based on the fact that Captain America passed on the shield to Falcon, right? So, and I know I personally wasn't really that upset about that, but I know a lot of people that were just really up in arms, and they were like, it should have been Bucky. It should have been Bucky. What do you think?
I think as far as choosing between the two, they made the right choice. On the other hand, I said, but it robs the character of the Falcon from having a chance to grow. But that doesn't happen if Chris Evans doesn't decide to leave. Because remember, 5 or 6 years ago, he said, "I'll do these movies as long as they ask." But then he gets $80 million in the bank, and all of a sudden, maybe not. But I like the Falcon. I think he'll do fine with Cap. The Winter Soldier, I said, he. Cap is done, at least in comic book parlance, or continuity. The Falcon's done more to earn that promotion, if you want to call it that, than Bucky. And I know that Brubaker made Bucky Captain America, and that worked. That was a brilliant run. But as far as for the cinematic universe, or or the television show they're working on, or whatever, I think it makes the Falcon's a better choice.
Absolutely. Now, very quickly, because I want to start to wrap things up, but what do you think the future of the comic book industry is?
Pain. Oh, sorry, I went Clubber Lang there.
Yeah. Rocky 3.
The immediate future is, DC is doing some really good content, with one notable creator exception. Marvel's just doing nothing but, although they are hyping their next event before Empire even gets out of the gate. Unfortunately, the moment Marvel starts producing more content, within a month they'll have a 25% share, advantage over DC again. What that means, going long term, I think both companies are safe for the foreseeable future, because if nothing else, they're probably beneath the notice of their parent companies. They talk about it, well, Disney's got to trim, the money that Marvel Comics generates. Or someone said if Time Warner or whoever it was that owned DC last year said if they got rid of DC Comics, that money saved wouldn't even get through that same business day. They have so much money in under that umbrella. So I don't see it being a case where Disney, or like I said, whoever owns DC this week, comes in and shuts it down. But I do see it continuing to shrink in the superhero field, while the YA divisions, like Marvel just announced they're going to do a deal with Scholastic, where they mentioned 3 characters, and it was Miles Morales, Kamala Khan, and I can't remember who the other one was, but conspicuous by their absence was any of the Lee Kirby creations. So I think the future of Marvel is that they tried it about 5 years ago. It didn't take. I think they may be looking to try it again by grooming readers when they're younger, to where they'll be more readily acceptable of those if they make the transition into monthly comics. how long that lasts, I don't know.
Yeah. But you know what? That's good, because I was just going to warn you that that guy DZ and Tim Plateau both pretty much at the same time said he better not say digital. So, and yeah, and
I'm pushing 60. You think I'm going to say digital?
So, but anyway, this was a wonderful. It was wonderful to talk to you, Eric. It's always great to have you. I am definitely going to have you back on. Always great conversation. By the way, I love your comments. Love the comments and all the videos. They're always so insightful, and I always get a little bit of a chuckle. You can put words together. I definitely think you're a good writer too.
Thanks.
But anyway, yeah, thank you for joining me on tonight's live stream, and thank you to everybody who participated in tonight's live stream. It was a great turnout, much better than last week. Things, I really hope that everybody continues to come. We're going to be doing this every Friday. This is our Friday Night Geek Show. And we definitely will have new videos that will be posted this weekend and during the week. We're going to be posting weekly to bi-weekly. So we definitely stay tuned. That's all. That's basically all I have to say. Eric, thank you again. And do you want to do the whole? I'm going to let you do it. I want someone else to do it besides me. See you all in the next episode.
Which said, all I can do is that.
Yeah. All right. So
thank you for having me on. This was a blast. I thought, great conversation. Very much enjoyed this, and thank you to the people that came out, even you, Fankman. Even though he's still trolling me in the chat. But yeah, this was fun, and anytime you want me back, just ask.
Yep. It's Friday, bitches. Go and have some fun. Enjoy, and I will see you all in the next episode. Thank you, Eric. Take care.
Good night, kids.
Good night.